We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself.
It seems like Arthur's descent into darkness has struck a chord with mainstream audiences, bringing in waves of people who would otherwise turn their noses up at the concept of a tortured soul finding freedom in the destruction of the society around him. Why is this the case? Surely such a twisted film ought to push audiences away. However, it is precisely the unabashed and raw presentation of the Joker's darkness that scratches a repressed itch in our collective psyche. That of the shadow, our inner darkness that yearns for a release, and how exploring one's shadow can break you free from the world around you. As fresh as the Joker might feel in the climate of modern Hollywood, it is but the youngest child in the family of darkness. Films that explore the shadowy underbelly which haunts and lingers within us all, the part of us that has been just out of our conscious awareness, of which we collectively repress and hide from the world. These are the stories of the liberated shadow. But before we get to the fun murder time, why do we crave the depraved?
Is it some devil that crawls inside of you?
Well, get out your chalkboard, notes, and a bottle of vodka, because we're about to sharpen ourselves up, psychology style. Part 1. Jung and the Archetype of the Shadow. It's difficult to overstate how influential Jung has been in the development and study of psychology, with many of his ideas still underappreciated or misunderstood to this day. One of his core developments was the exploration of what he referred to as archetypes, near universal shared parts of our collective psyche that influence and sway our minds and behaviors. One of these archetypes being the unconscious shadow side of ourselves, that vault where you lock away the existential angst towards the world around you, and which bubbles up inside from the eternal repression, yearning for a release, stroking up that fire and spilling forth the ooey gooey sinister side of ourselves that we pretend isn't there. There are a remarkable amount of similarities when it comes to those who've explored their inner shadow, both in relation to themselves, but also in relation to the world around them. The dirty, restrictive systems of which we find ourselves trampled under. A society made up of the collective bootlickers, this, near universally, serves as the spark from which our shadows nurture themselves. Part 2. The Repression of the Self and the Birth of the Shadow. When Joker opens, we are immediately presented with a piece of the core dissonance that's explored throughout the entirety of the film. That of laughter masking tortured sadness, and how the systems that make up the world around us leave us feeling hollow, incomplete, and unaccepted. Arthur is ultimately a kind soul, just managing to scrape by while taking care of his mother and trying to make people laugh. The world he finds himself in, however, does not value these things, as Arthur's seen as a target by young hoodlums, a danger to his therapist, and incompetent to his boss.
Randall told you that?
Fuck up, Arthur, and a liar. You're fired.
And funnels this twisted sadness into his humor, desperately trying to figure out a way to laugh at the situation he finds himself in and better those around him. Nobody seems to understand this, however, and treats him like a freak for being so different than what the world expects him to be, leaving him feeling hollow and disconnected from the world around him. This hollow and disconnected feeling is something Arthur shares with Tyler. Tyler sees himself as a cog in the corporate machine. He lives a cold and superficial existence as a recall coordinator, making his living off of the misfortune and disfiguration of car crashes, filling his life with pointless objects as the only way to measure a sense of self-worth. A cog does not feel, however, and it's this lack of any substance to his life that feeds his insomnia. These characters live in cold worlds, surrounded by cold people, and feel both horribly out of place and just trying to find the place they fit into, holding on by nothing more than a thread and being pushed to the edge of their wits and ready to drop that baggage. All it takes is a spark, then a flash. The world crumbles, and freedom follows. The thread snaps as we tumble into the darkness. Arthur, having been fired from his job for having a gun meant to protect himself, is now aimless in the world he finds himself in. Losing the only thing that kept his sense of self-worth, he now sees the coldness around him as something to fight against, instead of merely something to cope with. The world pushed him too far, and now he's prepared to push back. Being put in the same situation we found him at the beginning of the film, Arthur is now ready to exact his revenge on the world that denies him his freedom and authenticity. Tyler's only tether to the world he found himself comfortably inside of was his lavish apartment, a way for him to see his place in the world. Now, it's smoldering ash, and he's lost his direction in life. Their realities have collapsed, so where shall they go? Forwards, towards the world of unashamed and terrifying freedom. Tyler learns how to fuel his anger from Durden, a perfect personification of someone who's let their shadow guide them to freedom. Having lost everything, he finds that now he has everything to gain. Starting with beating the ever-loving shit out of Durden, moving into a dilapidated old house with him, and getting other people to start beating the shit out of each other. Like a virus, this newfound freedom evolves and spreads. Arthur, having shot those yuppies on the train, has now inadvertently started a political revolt. The lone act of fighting back against the system has struck a chord with Gotham as protesters begin to push against the election of Thomas Wayne as mayor. As Fight Club grows, so too do the protests in Gotham. Both begin taking over the realities of those around them, elevating and leveraging the power among the brotherhood of the oppressed. The shadow has a tendency to escalate. For instance, Fight Club's growth is due to how it felt like an answer to a problem many didn't know how to unravel, a place of mutually fueled rage at the world they found themselves in, and a bond among the outcasted and oppressed. This is an inherently appealing idea to many, and as Fight Club grew, so did the power that Durden had the ability to wield. Similarly, the protests in Joker started out with some public approval and then continually escalated throughout the duration of the film as those in power sought to maintain their stranglehold on the city. Something which only caused a more volatile and violent reaction from the public at large. It's this process of escalation that poses the greatest threat to these characters and the worlds they find themselves in. Existential threats to humanity aside, as the shadow grows, one can direct the stream of chaos to do very useful things, like terrifying the shit out of your dickhead boss.
What the hell are you doing?
Letting the world know you're done dealing with its suffocating structures, or doing a lovely little dance number in public. A little nice, he's jumping down the stairs. Do you see him? Do you like that? Oftentimes, these characters can't even see how dangerous this process of escalation is as it's happening. As Durden gains more power, it seems to give Tyler more power as well, to a point. In the middle of the film, Durden asserts his dominance over Tyler by pouring lye on his hand, something that we can see as the shadow beginning to take over Tyler's reality. Tyler is now put in a position where he is subservient to Durden, no longer an equal. His home begins to fill up with recruits, as his personal space and mental safety are being put more and more at risk. Project Mayhem has begun, and at this point, Tyler becomes more and more powerless.
Stop trying to control everything and just let go. Let go!
Right, fine.
His world starts to mirror the beginning of the film as he finds himself surrounded by cogs who have lost themselves in Durden's ideology, moving like a machine to escalate the Shadow's power. They've started tumbling down the hill of darkness, and it's only getting stronger. But why should that matter when everyone knows that this is what the world needs more of? Thomas Wayne is a selfish, deceptive liar who denied his firstborn son any support, threw that child's mom under the bus, and covered everything up. He has abused his position of power, and as Arthur comes to understand how much he's been lied to throughout his life, it pushes him over the edge. He realizes this world doesn't work, so might as well escalate the collapse. And yet, it's that kind of mentality that causes these characters to let go of that steering wheel, becoming destructive in their lack of responsibility. And when you get that ball rolling, there's no stopping it. Robert Paulson is dead. The meatloaf has gone cold, and whose fault is it? The Shadow has been pushed too far. Once this line's been crossed, can it even be stopped anymore? Tyler realizes the danger of Project Mayhem, how volatile these acts of domestic terrorism are, not just to the ones who deserve it, but also to his own people he cared about. It feels too late, however, as Durden has gained total power over Project Mayhem, and Tyler struggles to find a way to unravel its plots, being stopped at every turn as the scope and scale of the Shadow's control begins to set in for him. Fight clubs in multiple cities, allies to Project Mayhem in the police force, nobody telling him anything about what's going on. It seems like there's no going back from this, only forwards. With his mom dead, the protests reaching their apex, and his girlfriend being a lie, Arthur begins expelling that darkness in any way he can. Arthur already wants to die. Redemption is out of the question, so stop cradling the darkness and let the darkness cradle you. Just commit to the Shadow and let it take hold. That's all that can be done at this point. Most movies don't go farther than this. These films are a cautionary tale on the dangers of letting the Shadow out of its cage, a warning of the out-of-control escalation, and a plea to the audience to retain their conformity. This is not that film. Remember that empty bottle of vodka? Well, fill that shit up with some sweet Moloko Plus and gather around for some ultra-violence as you slooshy what I has to say. Clockwork Orange is so good it makes me viscerally angry. A deep exploration of a character who has no qualms with letting their absolute darkness take hold, and even relishes using it in increasingly elaborate ways. Someone who has so totally embraced their darkness to the point of treating it like a fine wine to be explored and respected.
As I sluiced it, I knew such lovely pictures.
It's a twisted, refined, complex movie about a complex, refined, and twisted character, and I love it. Gushing aside, it also serves as a lovely example of what happens when you embrace the Shadow with open arms and the dangers of trying to destroy that part of somebody. Throughout the first third of the film, Alex has gone farther with his darkness than most films would even dare to flirt with. Beatings, rape, and robbery are all on the menu for this young hoodlum, and he loves every second of it. Yet, much like our fellow comrades, Arthur and Tyler, time catches up with those who let their shadows coat the world around them. Alex has a need for power. It's gaining power over his fellow droogs and getting them to commit crimes with him that serves as the start of this story. And as Alex pushes his friends too far below him, they they want more control over the group's actions, something that only fuels Alex's cold, calculating rage. Pushing into the realm of ultra-violence just to impose his power over others. It's this irresponsible lust for power that backfires for our young hoodlum as he finds himself betrayed by those he thought he could trust and is left for dead with a murder charge hanging over his head. Alex is thrust into a world of claustrophobia, pedophilia, and concentrated criminality. Alex attempts to hold on to his identity, ironically, by pursuing religion, projecting his shadow into the biblical tales of lust and murder as a form of escapism, eventually leading him to befriend the prison's pastor as he learns of the Ludovico technique, a way to escape by letting Big Brother take control over your mind and submitting yourself to the sins you've created for those around you. This is what separates A Clockwork Orange from the other two films we've explored so far. The film starts out with the protagonist unrestrained by the dominating forces that try to control him. However, once Alex has gone too far, he has the beliefs and systems of the society he finds himself within forcefully implanted in him. In order to try and take away the shadowy darkness that he so loved to explore, becoming trapped in a mental straitjacket of conformity and told this is how you become a functionally good person, when, in reality, it smothers you against those who wish to beat you below your own shortcomings. Having this constrictive clockwork becoming the true horror that one must face when they have their shadow forcefully repressed from the world around them, Alex has now become a passive pushover who has no means of defending himself, and has had his once noble love of music twisted into a horrifying hellscape of nausea. So if conditioning the shadow doesn't work, and letting it get all up in your worldview takes it to dangerous levels, what is to be done with this double bind of a situation you've gotten yourself in? It almost seems like the only way to escape from the inevitability that the shadow creates is to fight against it, become the darkness necessary to destroy what has been created, and become a witness to the new world you've created for yourself. But there is a better road. Fantastic Mr. Fox takes my anger and melts it into a confused spiral of dazzling wonder. This children's movie has the most nuanced and complete exploration of the strengths and merits of exploring your shadow of any of the movies we've covered so far, and it serves as a keystone to answering many of the scary riddles that have risen up when you reject the system. We've got Bogus Bunsen Bean as the system, boiled down into some rotten farmers. Mr. Fox being our titular hero who starts the story unrestrained by forces out of his control, yet he gives up everything to become a better husband and father, pursuing journalism as a replacement for squab burglary. Being a writer is a hollow existence, however, and Mr. Fox is fed up being a wild animal pretending to be civilized.
Honey, I'm 7 non-Fox years old now. My father died at 7.5. I don't want to live in a hole anymore, and I'm going to do something about it.
Fantastic Mr. Fox attempts to illuminate the shadow by casting its themes from a different angle. Instead of seeing the shadow as consuming, viral, dangerous, and coercive, it instead views the shadow as an amplifier. A big megaphone that must be wielded with caution, or else you might just end up in the crosshairs of the Bean Boys. Get your beans. But that's only going to happen if the megaphone is used selfishly, which is exactly what Fox ends up doing by brazenly slinking his way into the big bees and stealing all their squabs. An act that ultimately backfires and sets him and his whole family in complete turmoil. By not wanting to live in a hole anymore, and yet at the same time amplifying those selfish qualities, Fox created a far worse off situation than if he just learned to conform. The real question becomes, how much of Fox as a character is this shadowy, wild animal, and how much is a newspaper man, a friend, an athlete?
12 Fox years ago, you made a promise to me while we were caged inside that fox trap that if we survived, you would never steal another chicken, turkey, goose, duck, or squab, whatever they are. And I believed you. Why? Why did you lie to me?
Because I'm a wild animal.
You are also a husband and a father.
I'm trying to tell you the truth about myself.
The rest of the film follows a pretty similar structure to the other movies we've explored so far. The shadow spreads, escalates, goes too far, then backfires and puts everyone in a worse situation than they found themselves in before. But the key difference posed in Fantastic Mr. Fox is presenting this as part of the natural order, that ultimately the world is a chaotic place that can't be controlled, and that it's better to have authentic darkness than superficial conformity. And if darkness is inevitable, then the only way to responsibly explore it is to use it in order to protect those around you. This realization sets in motion the redemption of Fox as a character, taking in his wild side and giving it to those around him so that they may collectively push against the world that has held them down, tearing down those dominators, building up those around you, and pushing against the systems holding you back. This has been Love Letters. Now, please, share your darkness, live authentically, and become a part of those around you to make a better world.